Hello, I hope all is well. So today I thought we'd look at something, I wasn't sure what to call this to be honest, Cab Sizzle. And it all stems from basically when you load the cab block, you get this, well, in legacy mode, you get this 1x4 Pig 57 cab that loads up. And typically, depending on the sort of tones you're going for, this isn't a cab that you would use or you'd think to use. And I've always kind of liked what it did to the tone in that it adds this nice kind of, well, sizzle up top. So it's this kind of like, yes, it's a very small speaker, and because of that, you get this really kind of small, sizzly kind of sound to it. And in isolation, it might not be ideal, but the cool thing is when you start to add that to, say, another cab, you get this really kind of nice blend of the kind of sizzle and the kind of top end going on in the 1x4, along with whatever cab that you might choose to go along with that. So I put this preset together. It's in my usual downloads on my Ko-Fi page, which I'll link below. And it's comprised of like 2 amp setups. So on the one hand, we've got the Brit 800 2203 high. And on the heavier side of things, we've got the Archean Bright amp. And for the drive block, I'm using the Integral Pre, which was added recently, as I really love what it's kind of doing to the attack and feel of the guitar going into these amps. So check that out if you haven't already in terms of a drive block or a boost sort of option. So in this first example, I've got the 2203 high loaded with these settings. Gains around 7, pulled back on the bass a bit, but essentially that's it. There's no other tweaks to the amp. And then for the cab, I've just got the, well, the factory 1x4 Pig 57 loaded in ultra res mode, and then we'll add the second cab to this in ultra res mode as well. I'll switch that up to hear what it's actually doing to the sound. So yeah, basically a small speaker sound, but you can hear the sort of amount of, I guess, saturation that's going on there as the speaker's really being pushed to its limit. And now I'll show a 4x12 I picked out from the list, also mic'd with a 57 to hear how that sounds. So that's, I guess, like a typical 4x12 sort of tone. But the cool thing is if I add the 1x4 Pig to this, so you can hear there that we're getting all the kind of fullness from like the bigger cab, and then we're getting this kind of extra saturation or sizzle maybe from the 1x4. And there's so many different options to try out, I think, when combining cabs together. So I'm using the FM3 Turbo. We can load 1 cab block, which has 2 IR slots. And the FM9 and Axe FX3, we've got 2 cab blocks that we can use that each have, I believe, 4 IR slots. So you can really get creative with the kind of like mixing of various cabs. And I'd really suggest checking out the 1x4 and mixing that with other cabs of your choice. So a quick tip here for like quickly finding, say, another second cab to mix for this, I'd suggest something mic'd with a 57. Obviously, there's a whole ton of cabs that are on offer, but using the filter up here on the top right-hand side, if I type in 57, I just get all those cabs that are mic'd with a 57. So you can quickly go through and really find another cab to match that's mic'd with a 57 instead of scrolling through endless pages of cabs. And something else that we can do to add to this is actually use the preamp page in the cab block. And what I've done is on the second scene, I've used channel B, and I've added within the preamp section on channel B, the modern preamp type, high quality, a bit of drive to kind of push that mic preamp. And then I'm adding some treble under the tone stack. The filter is the same in both of those, so we're using a low cut of 60 Hz and a high cut of 8K with only a 6 dB octave roll-off. Again, these are settings to taste, I guess, for the low cut and high cut, but I found it worked quite well on here. You can, of course, add more of a cut to the high end, which might be better or not depending on your setup. So I might actually go for the 12 dB octave here. But the thing with the more sizzle is because of the tone stack that we're adding more treble to there, we're getting a bit more bite as well without it being too trebly or aggressive, as we've got that extra cab and saturation going on. So again, these are things to try out. It will sound different on your setup than to mine, but I quite like the results I'm getting with this kind of setup along with the preamp. So yeah, scene 2, more treble, more sizzle, more stuff going on the high end, but that might be something that's, well, more to your liking compared to that first scene. And then in scenes 5 to 8, we're using the Archean Bright. I've switched guitar to my Ibanez, which is in drop B, so more heavy kind of stuff. And I'll show you the difference that adding this extra sort of cab makes with more gain. I think it's possibly even more noticeable when we've got more high gain going on. So here's just with the 4x12. And adding the Pig 57 to that. So when there's more gain going on, the addition of the Pig 57 speaker really kind of adds to that, or more excitement in that high end, I think is possibly one way of doing that. And again, we've got these additional scenes where I've pushed this even more with the preamp on there as well. Now the only thing there is that it's possibly a bit boomy with this guitar tuned lower. I think in standard tuning you won't necessarily run into those issues as much, but for the higher gain sounds I'll actually add a multi-band compressor, and we'll load in actually something from Leon Todd's block library, which is really useful if you haven't checked it out yet, to add to your setup. And it's essentially Titan. So all it's doing is it's not compressing the lows or the highs, but it's saying to compress that lower mids kind of region that is really useful for lower tunings and for playing the kind of heavy stuff. And just in case, I've just added like a sidechain gate as well. So if you want to try and use this for really heavy stuff, you can just activate the gate and the multi-band compressor so that you get that kind of control and also a really tight and quick gate. I'll link to a video I did on noise gates as well if you want to know more about that. So finally, we'll look at scene 3, which is basically the 2203 with the additional drive block. And then I'm adding in 2 delays. So one of the delays is a ping pong delay, nothing too crazy on there. And then on the other side, I'm using the multi-delay that's set to the Aurora delay to give this kind of like, it's not a reverb, but it gives this other sort of sense of space. So instead of using a reverb, I'm using 2 delays to kind of like get this idea of space going on, and it's a lot of fun to play with live. One final thing that I'd suggest is if you're just going to be noodling about with this setting, you can turn on and off the drive depending on what you want. I would suggest possibly turning off the gate completely, which I'm going to be doing here, so you're going to be hearing this noise, so that you get the most out of the dynamics of your playing and kind of the volume change levels. In any case, I hope that was useful. Hope to see you in the next video. Take care.